Have you ever been in a conversation where everything's going really well and then suddenly you don't really know what to say next and you end up in that awkward silence? Well, if it has, you're going to want to check this out. So let's talk about it. Hey up, mate, and cheers for finding this video today. I appreciate that. If you're new around here, my name is Dan. I'm a British English teacher and I'm here to help you feel confident when you're communicating in English. Now today, we're going to be talking about why conversations just kind of die out and end in an awkward silence, because it's horrible, but there are some things you can do about it. So let's jump in. If you've ever been in a conversation that just suddenly seems to die, I understand your pain, mate. This happens to loads of people and it can be really, really tricky because, you know, sometimes it's not your fault. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it can be helped. Sometimes it can't. And that can make it a bit of a difficult beast, you know. But let's kind of go a bit deeper, shall we? So there are some reasons that this tends to happen, right? One very common reason is that you spend way too much time thinking in your native language. Now, when you start learning a language, it's quite common that you use the translation method, you know. Everything you hear, you translate it into your language. Then you think about what you would say in your language and you translate that into English and then you say it, right? And that's all well and good, but that takes a lot of effort. And also, it takes quite a bit of time, you know. And if you're translating everything you hear and everything you want to say, yeah, it can really slow a conversation down and it can cause it to stall and might even lose interest of the person you're speaking to, and that could be a reason that this happens. Another reason is you put a lot of pressure on yourself to be perfect. You know, we all suffer from perfectionism, and I say it every week, but perfection is a trap that keeps you stuck, and we don't like that. So you worry way too much about speaking perfectly, you know. You always try and find the perfect expression, the perfect vocabulary, the exact grammar that you should use in this situation. And that causes you to hesitate because you're thinking about what to say. You end up correcting yourself and you say, oh, maybe it's this way, maybe it's that way. And you kind of, you know, go round and round and round. And sometimes you'll repeat the same point multiple times just to make sure it's been understood. And you end up just kind of rambling. And rambling is difficult for you. It's also difficult for the person you're talking to, you know. If you've ever spoken to somebody that takes 10 minutes to get to the point, you know how difficult it can be, yeah? And another reason this happens a lot is you don't have a plan. Everybody needs a plan. Mr. T loves it when a plan comes together for you 80s and 90s kids. But yeah, so when you get stuck, you kind of panic because you don't know what to do. You haven't got a plan. Well, you know, in that case, you just kind of don't know what to do, do you? Like, so when you get stuck, you don't really know what to do or what to say to keep things going. And that's why one of the conversations just kind of ends up going silent. And all of this stuff is no bueno, which over the recent episodes I've come to understand means not good in Spanish, I think. Honestly, I don't know. But anyway, so that's the reason that this happens, right? And we don't like that. Now, this happening sucks for a number of reasons. You know, first of all, it feels awkward AF, as the kids say. AF stands for as fuck, by the way. So feels awkward AF because I'm down with the kids, you see. So when a conversation dies and that awkward silence kicks in, it can feel like you're just stuck and time stops and it's proper awkward and it's not a nice feeling, that. So we don't like that. Another reason it sucks is it makes chatting to people not fun. So if this happens to you all the time, every time you try and talk to somebody, you end up in this awkward silence, it's going to start to feel like a ball ache rather than something that you actually enjoy, right? Which means you're more likely to avoid doing it. And, you know, if you don't talk to people, you're going to be unable to make friends. And if you've got no friends, you're going to be proper lonely. And then eventually you'll end up in a 1-bedroom apartment with like 50 cats. And to be fair, it sounds kind of good some days. You know what I mean? But yeah, we don't want to be that crazy old cat bloke or woman or whatever. So suggest you make some friends, and that's why this sucks. Oh, all right. I guess that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Another reason this sucks is you're going to find it hard to make connections. Moving to another country is already pretty isolating. It's a pretty lonely experience. So if you've ever lived in a different country, you'll know how lonely it is. And when I moved to Japan, loneliness is hard work, yeah? So if you move to the UK, for example, you might feel isolated. And if you can't connect with other people, at work or in social situations, that's going to make it way, way worse, right? And that's going to make you feel really lonely. And if you can't connect with people at work, it might even hurt your career as well, So it's going to be hard to move up in your company if everyone thinks you're a bit of a loner and a bit weird, right? So, yeah, these are reasons why it sucks when conversations just die. Now, we can focus on the bit that you can do something about, right? So there's a few things that you can do to kind of keep conversations flowing and keep them moving, even if you're not really sure what you want to say. So the first thing is stop translating everything in your head. And I know this is easier said than done, but it's like this. Translating in your head is what most people do when they start learning a language. I started it in English, and I'm sure loads of you guys did as well. I started in Japanese, and you guys probably do it in English. But learning to think in the language is a skill that you have to develop, right? It's not just something that magically happens. You have to do it. And what I used to do is, like, when I was on the train or when I was on a bus or when I just, eating my lunch or whatever, I just look at something, whether it's out the window or, whatever I could see there and then. And in my head, I'd try and think of all the words in Japanese related to what I could see, like a tree and a bench and a shop and, So I just try and naturally pick up these words in Japanese without thinking about what the English thing is, just trying to connect the image to the word. And then after a while, I'd start to kind of make sentences in Japanese directly about what I could see. There's a bench next to the bus stop, for example. And I would do that every day. I'd do it every chance I got. And it only takes 2 or 3 minutes. But once you start developing that habit of looking at something, naming it and talking about it in the language you're learning without thinking too much about your native language, that's one of the first steps to developing thinking in English or thinking in whatever language you're learning. And I think if you do that every day, it'll feel weird, but eventually, at some point, you'll just be like, oh, I did it without thinking about my native language. That's cool. And anything we can do to move you away from the translation method to the more immersion method is going to work out pretty well. The next thing I want you to do, I want you to reframe your thinking, because if you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself in a conversation to be perfect, you're probably not going to be perfect very often. In fact, it's going to do the opposite thing, because we all know that perfectionism is bollocks, right? There's no such thing as perfect. Even natives like me, we cock it up all the time. Probably in this podcast, I've made mistakes loads of times, but I don't care, whatever. So you don't need to be perfect. You just need to be understood. That's the goal. It's not an exam. Conversation is not an exam. Nobody's giving you a score. Nobody's going to come up and be like, oh, thanks for talking to me today, but actually, it's only a band 5 conversation, that, mate. Sorry, no good, failed. Nobody's going to do that, So if the focus switches to let's just be understood, you can mime if you want to. You don't even have to use words. Just draw an interpretive dance if you want to. I'm not suggesting you do, but whatever. But practicing communicating different ways, So one game I love to play with my private lesson students is a game called Taboo. And the idea of taboo is you have to describe a certain thing without using the word or related words. So, for example, let's say the word is umbrella, right? And I'm not allowed to use the word umbrella. I'm also not allowed to use words like wet or carry or cover, whatever they are. And then I have to try and explain that. And the reason this is good is because it forces you to find other ways to deliver a message. And it's not going to be the most eloquent way. It's not going to be the easiest way. It's not going to be the perfect way, but it helps you get better at delivering the message, which is what we're trying to do in a conversation, right? Also, things like summarizing, like watching something and summarizing it in your own words, or paraphrasing, taking a text and rewriting it in your own words. All of these things are great activities that you can practice that will help you get better at delivering a message rather than being perfect, right? And it'll shift that mindset. Another thing you should do is develop a plan. Don't just go into a conversation with no idea. Go into a conversation and have some strategies ready if things go tits up. If you're in a conversation and it slows down, have a backup plan. Like, have a bunch of ready, prepared follow-up questions that you can just pull out whenever things start going slowly, right? Learn how to change the topic naturally when you can feel things slowing down. Or if somebody asks you a question and you need a bit of time to think, don't just leave an awkward silence. Use some hesitation devices saying, yeah, that's a really good question. I never thought about that before. All while I'm talking, I'm thinking in the background what it is I'm going to actually say, right? So fill the awkward silences with hesitation devices for you, or make sure you've got a bunch of prepared questions that you can bust out at any particular time, and learn how to change topics well. And that way you can keep things going, yeah? I think that's pretty useful. And the last thing that you should probably do is practice, flex that muscle, flex that conversation muscle. So practicing speaking, practicing conversations ideally, but if not, practicing speaking just in general will help you. But if you want to practice speaking with other people, the more you do it, the easier it gets and the better you'll get at it. So you need to kind of apply all of the skills we've talked about in real life conversations. So ideally in a safe space, For example, I've got something called the BritSpeak Hub. It's my private community where basically there's a way to connect with other learners and with me in group chat and stuff like that, where you can actually practice speaking to other people. And it also has daily speaking challenges. So, you can practice things like summarizing and paraphrasing and the taboo game, and all that stuff is already in the community for you. And yeah, I think it's something that if you're interested, you should check it out. So you can actually join now. It's $19 a month for the basic access, but it's not going to be this price for very long because starting this month, things are changing. It's getting better. So if you want to get in now while the price is cheap, it's probably a good idea. And now it's over to you. What is the most difficult part of keeping a conversation going in English for you? Let me know in the comments and maybe I'll make a video about it in the future. But until then, good luck in conversations, especially if you're talking to native speakers. And if you find it difficult to talk to native speakers, actually, you should probably check out this video next.